Hopefully we'll have a chance to vote on it tonight. We do not have any minutes, so we can scratch that and then we'll adjourn. So I'm going to open this up right away to Ed and Julie. Thank you both for coming tonight, and thank you all department heads for coming tonight. I do appreciate this, and we'll try to make your part of the evening as quick as possible and get you out of here. We all know you work hard. So Ed, Julie, I'll defer to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you everyone for coming. Tonight is the official kickoff of the FY18 budget. It is a long process. It starts officially tonight and will end at the conclusion of the annual town meeting, which is the first Tuesday in May. And sprinkled in between are a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions and a lot of changes and a lot of number crunching. So I think what we're going to present tonight is things look optimistic right now as compared to what it looked like last year. I can tell you as a result of the one-time appropriations for stabilization OPEB, we're now working that into the budget because it wasn't a permanent appropriation. So that really helped out things, as well as some of the changes we made in healthcare and savings that we realized over a 3-year period that we're applying to the budget as well. So with that, I'm going to step up to the podium and start the PowerPoint presentation.
And Ed, if you'd like, I'll have everyone hold questions till after the presentation.
Okay, that would be great. So the first slide is a recap of revenues and expenditures, boiling down to an estimated surplus right now of roughly $549,000. I'm going to get into each segment of the revenue and expense, so without being redundant, I'm going to hold some comments on some of the details on this slide until I get into the actual revenue and expenditure sources. So on the local receipt side, it shows a comparison of the current fiscal year that we're in and the estimates that we are using for FY18. Local receipts is level funded, a minor drop of $11,373. Cherry sheet revenue, right now we're going with level funded, even though there are some issues that we'll identify at the state that is somewhat concerning at this point. I can tell you the tax levy increase of $1.5 million. It includes, for presentation purposes, full utilization of Prop 2.5, as well as $475,000 of new growth. Debt exclusion, several accounts, pretty straightforward. This is the amount we have to raise for Auburn Middle School and Auburn High School as a result of passage by the voters. Available funds, we have a decrease of $419,000, which is primarily made up of a one-time use of ambulance proceeds for the purchase of an ambulance in FY17. Total revenue right now is estimated to increase by $1.120 million, or a 1.81% increase. And on the appropriation side, an increase of $571,000 and change, or just under 1%. On the revenue side, now I want to break this down into categories. Tax levy. We're estimating total tax levy of $38,889,293.12. That commits 2.25% to the operational side of the budget. And once again, in accordance with the financial policies, it applies 1/10 of 2.5% towards our capital improvement program. This budget utilizes $475,000 of new growth, and I'm going to get into a graph of the new growth where we actually have a 5-year average much greater than that. But in FY17, we had a major increase in new growth as a result of a review of our personal property. We don't believe they did a total review, extensive review of personal property on the field. We recognize a one-time new growth in that area. We believe that's not going to be available next year, so we're coming off that by about that value. Excess levy would remain if we used the entire 2.5 at $4,065,000 and change. The levy utilization based upon this budget would be at 90.54, leaving unused levy at 9.46. This budget would raise approximately $2.8 million outside of the levy to fund the debt exclusion for the Auburn High School and Middle School. And we do have a debt exclusion offset approved by DOR that applies $83,000 and change as an offset to that debt. Here's the new growth chart. As you can see, over the past 5 years, it averages $701,246. As you can see in the last bar, 2017, we had certified new growth at $867,000. I hope we get more than the $475 that we're projecting right now. If so, that would allow us to address some other operational and budget issues at the fall town meeting and potentially allow us to continue to feed our OPEB and our stabilization accounts. Here's a snapshot of the tax levy. Tax levy base that we calculate 2.5% on is $41,443,000 and change. 2.5% of that is $1,036,000. Projected new growth of $475,000, giving us a total levy limit of $42,954,695.24. We would be taxing $38,889,293.12. Other revenue source, Cherry Sheet State Aid for FY18. We're projected level funding. Despite the fact that the state has already adjusted their revenue by approximately $900 million. And coupled with the fact that revenues fell shy of estimated projected revenue of $500 million. So what that means for the current budget is unknown. The state is addressing that now. I'm sure we'll have a better indication on what the revenues will be for local aid when the governor releases his budget in January. Until such time, I think it would be wise to at least project a level funded state aid budget at this point. Available funds. We've had some reductions in available funds from current fiscal year. We had a one-time $100,000 appropriation out of overlay surplus to fund some facility improvements, which will not be available in 18. We had an overall reduction of $25,000 from current fiscal year in SOAR retained earnings to fund SOAR equipment and capital needs. We had utilized a remaining balance of the Packagug lease proceeds that we received under the old management group that ran the golf course, which will no longer be a revenue source. Police towing, same with that. We no longer are receiving any revenues from police towing. We cleaned that out in the current fiscal year. Here's that reduction in ambulance proceeds of $265,000 that was used as a one-time purchase. And we will be receiving one-time additional revenues from cable access funds. We did establish an enterprise fund for that beginning July 1, but we will not have certified retained earnings at that point in time. As a result of that, we included in the capital plan a new department called Cable Access, which will require for FY18 a total of $28,170. In order to make that available for expenditure in the CIP plan, we're going to have to vote that as a one-time available fund. All other available funds will be level funded in this budget. Here's a listing of the available funds totaling $1.324 million. As you can see, FY17 value versus FY18 value. Local receipts, at this time, we're level funding all local receipts. It's too early to determine what those actuals are going to be. We have approximately 7 more months to go. But we do recognize a slight reduction in our non-reoccurring revenue of $11,373. That amount of money was used for supplemental real estate tax, as well as a small amount that was used from a debt exclusion DE1 approval by DOR that we took in as a local receipt because that was not certified until September of 16. Here's a listing of all our local receipts. As you can see, for the most part, it's level funded. The only thing that is not included in here at this point in time is the enterprise fund for cable access. There will be an operational side of the budget which we do not have yet, but it's going to be, it will net out to a zero because those funds will be recouped entirely through the enterprise fund. Overall, the projected revenue that we are estimating at this point in time is $63,036,894.05. That's up 1.81% over current fiscal year. That's an increase of $1.120 million. On the expense side, the budget presented tonight includes a 2% index for all wages, excluding fire. The fire budget does include 4 new firefighters to meet July 1 negotiated commitment to meet the schedule change from 48 to 42 hours. As a result of that increase, there has been an offset that was recognized in negotiations. Firefighters and fire officers received a 0.00 over a 3-year period. Those dollars that would normally go towards that increase, on average of 2%, is being used to fund a portion of those 4 firefighters. And the offset, the difference in the offset to that is going to come out of ambulance receipts. This budget meets our contractual solid waste obligations. It's an increase on the pickup of 3.25%. It increases our group health insurance by 10%. Last year was up 12%. Discussions with our GBS, our healthcare consultants, lead us to believe that 10% at this point will be adequate. So this is something we're going to watch very closely because this can change very quickly in either direction overnight. It increases our retirement assessment by 7.8%, and I use that because that was the increase in the assessment from 16 to 17. So that's something we'll probably get in January, and we can modify that as soon as it comes in. It increases our tax levy funding for CIP by that 0.25%, or 1/10 of 2.5. It adds $103,609 to the CIP. We're making use of the one-time $100,000 contribution to OPEB in 16, as well as a $300,000 earmark, in 17, as well as a $300,000 earmark to stabilization in 17. That now becomes part of the operational side of the budget as a reoccurring revenue expense. It maintains our OPEB funding at $500,000. This budget meets all of our debt and interest obligations. It level funds our roadway reconstruction and drainage accounts. It level funds snow and ice, although we're making snow and ice one of our priorities to consider increasing that. And it level funds Medicaid receipts as amended at the fall town meeting at $160,000. Continuing with FY18 expense, this budget level funds all of our cherry sheet charges and assessments. And once again, the budget includes, it applies all of our financial policies in consideration of the formulation. There is currently no earmark in stabilization. The budget provides for a 2% increase in Bay Path. And I just applied that percentage only because I don't know what that assessment is going to be. I don't know what the enrollment is going to be. Our assessment could be level funded. It could go down, but just as a safety net, it did provide something for Bay Path. It incorporates a new org. There was an outside article that provided a sum of money, $30,149 in FY17, to provide education for a student that is attending Norfolk Agricultural. We recognize that that is going to be a recurring operational expense, and that's why we're making a permanent part of the budget. This now has its own org, and it is highlighted on your budgetary summary in the packet before you tonight. This budget also maintains funding to maintain maintenance at Mary D. and Julia Bancroft. Certainly this is something that may evaporate depending on the outcome of the RFPs and whether or not there is a award to be made. Here's our listing of the budgets, current fiscal year as well as 18. As you can see in yellow is Norfolk Agriculture School. All of the debt and interest is highlighted. It does provide for a borrowing for our FY17 and FY18 CIP. FY CIP before you tonight requires a bond issue to meet that of about $651,000. I can tell you our FY17 budget, which is currently banned in the amount of $622,000. So combined, we came up with an estimate of debt and interest to meet that obligation. As you can see, there are other charges and expenses with total appropriations of $62,487,394.81. As you can see, in the middle of this overhead, there's a value for town school and wages at $586,403.67. That's 2% across the board, excluding fire. All wages, including overtime. Recap of the expense. Right now it's showing $62,487,394.81. That's up 0.92, just under 1% over current fiscal year. It's an increase of $571,194.53. Leads us to a estimated projected surplus at this time of $549,499.24. A far cry to what we were showing last year as a deficit balance that we had to deal with. So this is good news, but like I said, there's a number of moving pieces here that can change this very quickly. So we're going to keep an eye on things, and we'll update you as information becomes available. In terms of priorities, we asked the departments to provide us a list of priorities to be considered in the course of deliberations. And let me identify those for you at this time. It would be 3 police patrol, and we are going to have some discussions with the chief and the lieutenant on ways to implement this over a multi-year phased approach. A need has been identified in the Department of Health and Inspectional Services. Inspectors are sorely needed. The activity has picked up immensely. It's a trend that has been continuing over the past several years. So it's something we need to address. Once again, we have a full-time equivalent at the Highway Department, suggested to be a heavy equipment operator, with the expansion of park seasonal help. We've taken on a lot of work as a result of Pappas coming online, Veterans Memorial Corridor, and other facilities that require a lot of work. So we're looking to expand those hours. As a result of a successful facilities management, we are looking to consider building an addition onto the existing highway department that would allow the facility crew to continue their fine work, and they need a workshop. They're really pressed for space. And I can tell you that they saved the town in excess, the last time we did a calculation, in excess of about $800,000. This building, we estimate, would be in the vicinity of $30,000 to $40,000, so this may qualify under our free cash policy if we're not able to do it through the operational side of the budget. Once again, we'd like to increase our snow and ice budget to require less reliance on our reserve at year end. I don't have to remind the Finance Committee, we're dealing with this on an annual basis. We'd like to get that to a level that's more consistent with a 3-year average. We'd also like to increase our reserve for extraordinary and unforeseen expenses. That's something that we identified in our financial policy. That's something that we would like to see adjusted. We know we're going to need dollars to meet the most recent mandated public records law recently enacted. And we have some need in the area of MIS for backup storage solutions, system security, and internet network upgrades. So these are areas we'll be looking at when we're meeting with the department heads. They're going to bring these items to our attention. There also are some school, let me just take that. The school department has also submitted a list of priorities in generic form. They will get more detailed as the budget moves along. There are 3 items: social emotional needs of children, early childhood learning, and increasing student achievement. So those are 3 areas that the schools are focusing on with respect to the formulation of the FY18 budget. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point in time.
Great, thanks, Eddie. I'll open it up to our committee first, and if there's actually any comments or questions from the department heads. But any questions here first? On this, I know it's the first time we got to see the budget ourselves. I know we did receive the CIP a little earlier. Anything? I think I might add 1 or 2, Ed. The surplus that we're running now, based on this 540,000, that's equivalent to about 1.25%.
So, once again, this budget was formulated on a premise that we would use the entire 2.5, like we did last year. And when the final numbers came out of the fall town meeting for the current fiscal year, we were taxing at 1.23%, or 1.28% of 2.5. If right now the surplus at 449 would mean we'd be taxing at a rate of 1.25%. So any utilization of the 549 would increase that 1.25. Now, certainly the revenue numbers are not final. I've gotten some indications from Dr. Brunel that there may be potentially some additional Chapter 70 money coming Auburn's way. We won't know that until the first set of numbers are released. So these numbers could change. So.
Okay. And lastly, just so we're all aware, all of the collective bargaining is complete. So the 2% that you spoke collectively of, excluding the fire department, different circumstance, those numbers are all set in stone in terms of legal.
They are set in stone. For presentation purposes, I just averaged it out at 2%.
Yes, okay.
So some bargaining groups may be below 2, some may be slightly above 2. All depends how their wage consideration was structured, but for the most part, it would average roughly 2%. So.
Okay, great. And I think the last comment I wanted to make on this, you and I had talked on the phone earlier today, was that I'll say the wish list, and I don't think we got a hard copy of that, or I couldn't find it in my package. I'm sure we're going to get one. Just due to timing, the schools piece, Dr. Brunel, wasn't ready for tonight for that, so that'll be further fleshed out.
Yes.
Just a matter of time.
We will get something to the Finance Committee for a permanent part of your packet for your consideration while you're deliberating with those departments.
Great. That's fine. Anything else, Kim?
Eddie, I just had a question on local receipts. The sheet you showed us, is that actual local receipts for the FY15 and 16, or is...
No, the local receipts is actually what's on the recap. So I can tell you that FY17 values were recently certified by DOR, approved by DOR, and reflect more of the FY16 actuals. So I can get you those actual numbers if you like.
The 15 and 16, those are like budgeted numbers, not actuals?
Correct.
So is that the way we always do it for presentations, so you don't really see what you're actually collecting?
It's that. Well, I'll tell you why it's that way. Because when you look at the first page on excess or deficiency, if I were to plug in the actual numbers, those are going to go from unbalanced to it may show a surplus or a deficit.
Okay.
So I can provide, I have no problem providing those to you or giving you a schedule of those actuals. But because the budgets are presented with those estimates and actuals are not used as a adjustment after the fact, I left them as presented.
Through the chair, just regarding new growth, that's an estimate as well. Can you just explain what new growth would entail? And I understand the reassessments for this reason for the spikes in 16 and 17, but what is new growth?
So new growth would be any new construction, additions, decks, anything of that nature to an existing structure or a new structure that brings new value onto the books.
As well as new construction, anything that's being built.
So say your house is currently valued at X and you put on an addition. That addition has a value. That new growth would be part of that number.
Okay. And your estimate's just based on the...
It's based on history, but it's also based on the economy. So if the economy should peter out or become somewhat stagnant, there's not going to be a level of new growth that you'd see in good times. So what the election will mean in terms of growth, we don't know. I mean, there is some uncertainty whether people still feel good about the economy and feel confident about spending money and adding on and building, and we just don't know how that's going to affect the market at this point in time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I've got another new growth question. We added on some additional, personal property taxes one time. Were they for the telephone poles or something? There was a big spike, no pun intended, that came on last year that we know would not be recurring.
Yes, there was, I think, a value by the grid lines and National Grid equipment, things of that nature, that resulted in a boost to personal property. The personal property recognized in FY17 was not just a flyover, but boots on the ground in these facilities and actually inventorying and checking out the equipment and putting a revised value to that.
Did that go backwards? Was there any prior year catch up on some of those?
No, through RRC, they come in, it's an outside vendor that we use who values our personal property. There are certain options that we select in order to do that. So we get aggressive every so often because we want a total comb through and a total review. This is one of the aggressive years, and as a result of that, it paid dividends for Auburn. So you pay more money for them to do it, but the results are what we thought they were going to be, and it turned out best by way of that additional new growth.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Any other questions? Plenty to digest here, so that's good. And if not, I'll open it up to really any department head. The Chairman of the Board of Selectmen here. Ken, good to see you tonight. Any questions or comments from anyone on the process? I know the process really hasn't changed too much. We try to get better at it every year, which is hopefully less meetings, but better meetings every single year, at least up here. So, okay, no questions, that's good. We received a CIP package in the last week. I know we've gone over it somewhat. I don't think we're going to do any kind of voting on it tonight. What I will open up, is there any specific questions on the CIP to any department heads? And everyone's going to have a chance when we go through your operating budget to talk a little bit about CIP if you choose to. So I'll open it up to that, and we'll reopen it up whenever we see you folks, sometime over the next 4 or 5 months. Okay, that's good. I like that. So what I'd like to do then is, these folks can go home, I hope, right? There's no reason to stay. I'd like to take a 5-minute recess just to allow everyone to clear out, and then we'll reopen the meeting. Can I have a second on that?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, 5-minute recess, thank you. Okay, I'll accept a motion to reopen the Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Okay, back to our agenda. We have several transfers to go through tonight, and then we'll be looking at the draft free cash policy, and that'll conclude the evening. So our first transfer tonight, I have in front of me, this is under Treasurer Collector. This is a transfer to the interest on abatements account, $450 requested from tax title. This is to fund interest on abatement for ISM Holdings, Inc. Do you have any questions, or do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our second transfer, this is under Police, interdepartmental transfer. This is a request to transfer $6,600 even to miscellaneous services from the patrolman account. And this is for evidence room property audits.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Our next transfer, also under Police, this is a reserve account transfer, and we have Lieutenant Harrigan here to help us with any questions, along with the Chief. This is for Chief salary, amount requested $4,540.12. This is under negotiated contractual increase. If there's any questions, they should be directed to Lieutenant Harrigan.
Motion to approve.
I have a second.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Also under Police, this is also a reserve account transfer. This is a Chief Quinn transfer. Amount requested $1,135.80. This is a negotiated contractual increase.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you. An additional reserve account transfer under police. This is Chief Holiday. Amount requested $4,243.92. This is for negotiated contractual increase.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Also under police, reserve account transfer. This is chief communication stipend. This is $750. This is newly negotiated contract item.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. And an additional reserve account transfer under police. This is under longevity. Amount requested $4,500. This is also a newly negotiated contract item.
I have a question.
Sure, Kim.
Is this specifically for the chief?
No, this is for the command staff.
And what's the longevity? What's the?
I'm trying to remember. I think 5, 10, 50. It starts at $300 and max is out.
It's 10 years. It starts at 10 years.
Okay.
So then it goes up incrementally 10, 15, 20, 25 max, and $300 each step.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next transfer, this is under our Inspectional Services Department. Amount requested is $4,791.87 to go to Public Health Inspector. This is from the Planning Assistant, Planning Energy Manager account, and this is to cover the cost of a part-time inspector. Do I have a motion or any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second, I have a question though.
Sure.
Is this a new position?
Yes, this will be a new position.
All second?
Yep.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Also under Inspectional Services, this is a reserve account transfer, Public Health Inspector. Amount requested $3,987, and this is to cover the cost of a part-time inspector salary.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
just make
Perfect.
comment on
Thank
that.
you, Ed.
This would be for a half-time position for remaining balance of the fiscal year. We prioritize, under the list of priorities, we want to add 1.5 to 2, all depending on the outcome of this vote. So our intent is to transition this into a full-time position effective July 1, with the potential of adding one more.
Carried. Thanks, Ed. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Our last transfer, this is under the reserve account, a salary transfer. This is from the Executive Office of the Town Manager. Amount requested $1,801. This is per Town Manager contractual obligation for performance evaluation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Great. Thank you for those transfers. Ed, regarding the police transfers, this was a new contract for the chief, just in general, and I should have prefaced on that while we were making those transfers, so thank you. And thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Alder.
Have a good and safe year. Lieutenant, good to see you. Be safe. Merry Christmas. Okay, our next item on the agenda, this is regarding the free cash policy. And Ed, you were going to do a quick presentation on this, or did you have an overhead on this one or not? I know we talked about it.
Yeah, I want to give you
How
a,
about overhead? All right.
so this is part of your packet, but for those of the public that may be watching, I want to put that up on the display board. We presented this to the Board of Selectmen Monday evening, asking their approval but they wanted some guidance from the Finance Committee. So in essence, I want to read what the revised amended free cash policy will mean, or what we're proposing. This policy sets forth guidelines for determining the use of certified free cash on an annual basis. In order to utilize a portion of free cash, the town must maintain a combined balance of free cash and stabilization, and that's what's up on the display screen, which is commonly known as unassigned fund balance in the accounting world. We want to maintain a level of 20% or greater each fiscal year. The 20% is a representation of a percentage of the total general fund operating budget. So we calculate the general fund operating budget by taking what's on our tax recap sheet on page 2. It's the total amount appropriated, less any enterprise funds, which are outside of the general fund. Each year, upon Department of Revenue certification of free cash, and provided the town has reached or maintained its 20% benchmark, the town may appropriate up to 50% of the annual gain in free cash for non-operational expenditures listed as follows. OPEB, which is other post-employee benefits, stabilization, capital improvement trust, capital purchases, the potential for conservation trust if statutorily adopted, facility improvements, and I added this as a result of my discussion with Kevin, the chair, or any other one-time non-operational expense. So the free cash policy, I want to emphasize, does not allow us to appropriate for any operational expense currently, nor will it under this amended policy. So for example, we currently have $9.385, let's call it $9.5 million of certified free cash. If next year we have a $2 million gain and that free cash now becomes 11.4, this policy would set aside $1 million of that $2 million gain, so our free cash would now become $10.4 million. It may allow us to use the other 50% for one-time expenditures, capital needs. We believe this is a good policy because it's going to take pressure off our capital improvement plan, allow us to buy capital items up front without borrowing money to do so. So it would save taxpayers money by not paying debt and interest, less reliance on bond proceeds. It accelerates our CIP plan by becoming zero dependent on bond proceeds to fund our capital needs. It just allows for future flexibility to address a number of things. So, as you can see, the graph, when we put our financial policies, when we brought them before you, and they were adopted in 2012, unassigned fund balance at that time was 9.20%. Now, in discussions with the rating agencies, they statistically put us in a comparison with other communities of like demographics and other elements that we are compared to. At the time, they told us we needed to reach a level of 17 to 20% of unassigned fund balance in order to be considered for an upgrade. I can tell you in 2015, when we did get our upgrade, we were at 17.89%. We were on the lower end. We wanted to get to the upper level. So we're now at the upper level. We feel comfortable bringing this before you, making this recommendation, being able to add to free cash through this policy in future years as well, but gives us some financial flexibility to deal with some other things that had to be put on hold because we wanted to make sure that our reserves were adequate. So you can see how the financial policies have worked over their 5-year period, getting us to that 20.51%. And it's going to continue to grow, we believe, because of our conservative approach in estimating revenues and using that same philosophy in appropriating throughout general government. So we believe this is a good policy. We hope that you will embrace it, endorse it, and send it back to the Board of Selectmen with your approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may
Thanks,
have.
Ed.
Ed, are there any, what are the pitfalls if it went up to above 20%, 21, 22%?
We don't see any pitfalls. That would be a good thing.
Some would say our taxes have gone up too much, though, so there is a pitfall to that.
So if that were the case, we'd be looking potentially to amend this once again. That may allow for a better utilization of that growth elsewhere. It may allow us to give something back to the taxpayers.
First, I was just thinking, was there any penalty that the state could put on about, I don't know, something about what do you call it, the cherry sheet if you had too much in free cash or whatever?
No, I think the state would advocate for the building up of reserves as well as a healthy fund balance as a way to create future stabilization and financial stability for any municipality.
Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, Mr. Chair, if I can, just to keep in mind, and Ed mentioned it, that benchmark can be moved up again by the bond rating agencies. In the last 6 years, it's been moved up 2 or 3 times. As Eddie showed, we're striving for a certain benchmark, it gets moved again, it gets moved yet again. It depends on the economy, it depends on different demographic factors that they use to weigh in on your bond rating. So that one shift, if we're not at that benchmark, that one shift can end up costing the taxpayers far more than it costs in having the free cash, because then if you don't maintain that bond rating when you go out to borrow for all the projects that we are borrowing, the high school, the middle school, our capital projects, there's an increase to the taxpayer for the debt service on that too. So we're trying to keep our eye on those levels. I would say down the road, if those levels were to raise once again by the bond rating agencies, and we certainly hope they don't, but if they did, Ed and I had talked about having to come back at a later date and even say, you know what, you might have to amend that policy, and it might have to be anything in excess of 22% at some point. But right now, we're comfortable with the 20. It seems to be a stable area to be in. We seem comfortable, as Eddie said, with the comps on the various communities that have similar bond ratings.
Actually, to add on to that, I think when we first presented our financial policies in 2012, when we formulated that, this was not a calculation by the rating agencies. They looked strictly at fund balance. Fund balance as a percentage of the operating budget. Now, fund balance is not free cash, so they changed the way that they evaluate a community now by this combination of free cash and stabilization. So things could change again. They may decide to evaluate a community using other criteria. But this is what's in place now. We believe we know we hit our benchmark. We got our upgrade. We feel comfortable bringing this to you as a result of where we are financially at this point in time.
Kev?
I noticed in the definition of free cash, you took that right from the DOR. The policy itself, is this something you sat down and wrote, or is this sort of a template or a best practice sort of policy? Or
this is our own policy. It's not a model after anyone else, but there are other communities that have free cash policies. It may be quite different than what we had proposed, but we're structuring ours based upon the model that we've presented to you in the past. So,
okay. And just I guess a formatting preference in terms of how it's written. We reference the definition of where to find the current year operating revenue.
Yep.
I guess I would prefer that almost to be a footnote as to instead of having the definition of where to find it in the midst of it. That's just
sure, we can do that.
A preference, I guess. It's not a it doesn't change the structure or anything. But
Yeah.
Chapter 70, and the state has a very intricate formula for figuring out the community's share. do they look at things? Do they look at the town's, well, they must look at the town's financial health. Do they look at free cash and balances and unreserved fund balances?
They look at one time, they looked at growth on an annual basis, for instance, in local receipts. So if there's substantial growth, that was evaluated in terms of a community's ability to pay. That's more so on the assessment for vocational schools.
Right.
I know those formulas have been changed and modified, and doesn't take into account, doesn't weigh those factors as much as it did in the past.
Good question, yeah.
Could we also get a copy of the recent recap sheet?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I believe the goal of this, along with what we're putting aside, that 0.25% for the capital plan, the idea is basically what we're borrowing annually, bonding out actually. That should further go down, as we get a little smarter. We've got our, knock on wood, our big projects out of the way, which are the schools. Those are huge projects. And now as we're maintaining the buildings and our other things that we're trying to do, this is just another way to leverage what we've already raised for tax dollars to cut down future borrowings of a smaller amount, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. So this will, we'll see the biggest impact probably another year or two on this, right? What's our I had asked you earlier what our
So we
CIP fund.
We put together a plan, the CIP plan that applies 1/10 of 2.5% every year towards our capital needs. So right now in the budget, capital budget that's before you for FY18, we're utilizing $860,000 of tax levy as an offset as a funding source for our capital needs. Years ago, we weren't using anything. So that slow growth in tax levy is reducing the amount that we have to borrow. Originally, this was a 15 to 20 year plan because our annual CIP was about $2 million. So we're now relying in this budget about $651 of bond proceeds. So if you carry that out, assuming the level of capital remains the same, in year 7, we will no longer need bond proceeds to fund any portion of our capital. This plan has been presented to the financial advisors, and they're using Auburn as a model for other communities throughout the country. We've been told, not only in capital, but some of our other financial policies and plans and our budgeting techniques. So we're very proud of that, and it's showing that it's working. So if you look at the 5-year CIP, although in 2022 it does balloon, and we're hoping to use, it's ballooning because the school capital is up $300,000 over the average 5 years. And it's up because capital investment has to be made in the high school as well as school at Swanson. They're looking for new windows and replacing flooring at the high school, which will be 15 years old. This policy will allow us to redirect some of those dollars as a one-time payment instead of funding it through the CIP. When I talked about financial flexibility in the future, those are the areas that we want to concentrate on so we can continue this plan and become totally dependent on funding our capital through tax levy on an annual basis. In terms of giving back to the taxpayers, I can tell you, when we presented this at the fall town meeting, we're not taxing at 2.5. We haven't for 7 years. We saved the taxpayers $18 million. We're proud of that. A lot of communities are taxing at 2.5. So we feel as though we are giving back to the taxpayers on an annual basis, and we're going to continue to do that as best we can going forward.
Thanks, Ed. Any other questions or comments on this? Kev?
Just a quick comment. I'm a new person to the committee, but in the short time I've been here, it seems like the town administration is being very proactive and looking forward as opposed to reactively looking for money. So it's good to see things like this are definitely thinking outside the box, and like you said, being used as a model. That's outstanding.
Thank you.
So one thing Ed had asked me is, as a courtesy, if we're comfortable with this, that we take a vote on this so it can go back to the Board of Selectmen. So I'll accept a motion to approve these draft free cash policies. Do you have a second?
Second.
Any further comments on this? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. To me, this is just a sign of success that wait around a little bit and stick with your guns, and this really pays off for us financially. So that's great. Okay, moving along then. We don't have any minutes tonight. Sharon wasn't not quite able to get to them. I know she's been very busy. So our next meeting, Ed, I can't believe we need to meet again this year, do we?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's a darn good thing.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask one quick question? It kind of goes back to the transfers and part-time positions, hoping to transition into full-time positions. The discussion with health benefits and retiree benefits and all that stuff, are there any positions that are beneficial to stay in that part-time range where they don't take the bump up? I mean, I'm sure there are some job requirements that you're not going to get a part-time person for skill sets, but when you said looking for, I don't know, we're talking a couple part-time positions, then moving them,
That's why we're starting off with a part-time position, to see how that works. The need would show there's a need greater than a part-time position, but we want to see how much of that hole is filled in. It will give us time to analyze it, assess it, and make a decision as to whether or not that department needs to further grow to handle the needs that are handled on a day-to-day basis.
And through the chair, as a follow-up on that, you mentioned it too, Kevin, some of these positions you're not going to be able to find someone part-time. With some of the ones that we have started off looking for a part-time person, particularly in the inspections industry, the competition is very heavy to get building inspectors, plumbing inspectors. It's very, very difficult. Where we can, plumbing, electric, we keep that on part-time. The building inspectors is a very competitive. Communities are poaching from one another to get building inspectors. It's become, it's very difficult. So we do have a part-time. We are looking to increase the hours of one of our part-time as well in the next budget. And then if that's still not enough, as Ed said, we would have to add the other position. There are certain positions that it's just too much of a challenge to try to get somebody in here 19 hours a week when they're being sought after for 40-hour-week positions elsewhere. So you're right, that is a huge issue. Where we can keep them part-time, we do. We do our best to do that. But certain fields, and we're finding the inspections are the toughest. We were looking at the other day just for, we'll get into it in the budget, but if you look at our building permits and the growth in our building permits over the last 3 years, it's enormous. It's a huge increase, and every one of those permits requires many multiple inspections for going out and taking care of it. And then when you're sending your resources to the new building permits, you've also got your health inspections that also get impacted by that, because every time a restaurant goes in or anything related to the health part of it, it's not just building, it's health. So you're actually having to have double inspections. So new growth is good, but with it does come some requirements for certain fields to be enhanced.
And that translates to dollars in forms of new growth, because if those inspections aren't being done and they're piling up, then we're not recognizing the revenue that it can bring in through taxation. So those inspections have to be done. It's in our best interest to get those done, get them completed, get it down to the assessor, let them pick up the value, and then it becomes part of the tax base. It's part of the economic engine, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. If I just mention one more thing, we did let the Board of Selectmen know, and it's a good opportunity to let you know. This year we engaged the services of the Zikos Group, which is a municipal tax title foreclosure property auctioneer. And we put them under contract, I believe, in August. And our first auction of town-owned foreclosed property is December 13th at noon in this room. We'll be putting up 3 properties. It's actually 4, but 2 residential properties that are abutting one another are being combined into one for a number of different reasons. And that's 423 South and 3 Old Millbury will be combined into one residential parcel. 20 Elmwood, which is right parallel along Route 12, Southbridge Street, is another parcel. And the last one is the only one that we actually have a house on, which is 6 Meadow. And 6 Meadow will be on there as well. So we're advertising for it. We're hoping to get good success with this first auction. They do a very professional, great job. Zikos has bundled this auction with an auction that they're doing in Webster as far as advertising purposes. It's been in New England Real Estate Journal, Telegram and Gazette. So we're hoping to get a lot of a good turnout for that. And then our intent is throughout the rest of the year to go back and once we get through the first one, go back and start looking at some other parcels and see if we can't bundle some other parcels and go out again. Try to get some of these parcels that really they were taken for tax title purposes. They were taken because taxes were owed to the town, and we need to move forward and get these back producing taxes and get them off of our liability. So we're moving forward on those.
Good. Yeah, I noticed that on the website. It's on there blinking red or something like that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
While we're talking about properties like that, can you give us just a brief update on the RFPs for the former schools? We
drafted the RFPs. The Board of Selectmen took their vote, I believe, is at the end of September, in anticipation of that vote to RFP both the Mary D. School and the Julie Bancroft. We started developing the RFPs. They're a little complicated because with both properties, we need to define the exact, as best as we can without an A&R, we need to define the land that is going with it. And in both cases, we are keeping the playground. That will not be sold. So we're working with town council who is reviewing it. He's done a great job. It's a very complicated RFP, but we're trying to make sure that we make it as clear as possible to a potential bidder where that property line is being drawn without having to go through the whole legal process right now of drawing that line. Because if anything happens and these are not able to be bid out at the first round or the second round, we don't want to go ahead and do an A&R and then have a separate parcel. So we're making that contingent upon. So it's added a few weeks to the time frame on what we were hoping to get out, just because the legal descriptions are a little bit complicated. So we're hoping to get it out in the next couple of weeks.
Good. Okay. Great. Appreciate the update. Any other questions? We don't have Julie here that often, so we should be leaning on her while she's here.
From any time.
Got to be invited. And if not, then we're kind of open on sometime early, mid-January, I guess, at least, for our next meeting.
Well, it all depends how you want to handle the capital. You want to make it part of the budget discussion when the departments come in, or do you want to do that as a standalone, or I'm
actually going to lean on maybe doing both. When we start the budget process, I might just set up an agenda item including just the CIP, open it up to some questions just to see if we're on the same page, maybe take another look at it, and then when we have in the department heads, if there's still questions, we'll address it. So, but not to spend a heck of a lot of time. It's certainly not worth having a special meeting just to go over the CIP. It's not big enough, which is a good thing. All right, anything else? If not, I hope everyone has a great holiday season and a happy new year. We'll meet sometime next year, whenever. And I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Have a good night.